are going to bring you all something a little bit different. We are about to discuss the differences between grants and contracts. Unlike our panel so far, where there were a lot of nuances, grants versus contracts is kind of an A-B type problem. Either an agency funds through granting mechanisms, through contracts, or sometimes a combination of the two. Rather than hear why an agency does one or the other, it's usually because of legislation, to be blunt, or what a grant or a contract means, we are going to hear from several of the SBIR and STTR agencies on some of the key things that are different between grants and contracts, why those differences are important to understand, and how they can potentially impact your award. To lead this roundtable, we have called on the talents of Stephen Hogan, advisor and VA verification counselor with the New Mexico Procurement Technical Assistance Center. Steve provides government contracting assistance to small businesses throughout the state of New Mexico with over 40 years of experience in both military and civilian positions. Steve is a retired USAF colonel, having served 30 years, both active and reserve. And also, before we begin, I just want to remind our panelists to please turn off your microphones unless you are actively speaking. There's a little microphone icon you can toggle on and off. It helps with echo from your speakers. But let's move forward. Steve, I will now turn the floor to you to lead our discussion.
Thank you, Garrett. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Garrett. I appreciate that introduction. And before we get started, I just want to touch on one thing real quickly. You may or may not be wondering why PTAC is involved in this and what our role is. And I was not able to sit in on all the sessions up to this point today, but I just wanted to point out that we are here to help, especially those who are new to the SBIR, STTR programs. We are here to help you with the preparation. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with the echo here.
Cancellation that should actually remove any echo you might be getting in
Yeah,
your
I'm not seeing that.
there.
Camera. Dell, can you help me with that? I'm still not seeing an icon for that.
Yes, Steve. So in the bottom of your screen, you should have a icon
We'll
that
press
looks
on.
like
I'll
a
try to
gear
just
that says settings.
ignore the echo. Yeah. Nonetheless, let me press on. So some of the things that we offer are assistance before you even get started with things like your SAM registration, helping companies get their UEI in place and their cage code, and then settings. I'm still trying to find the there.
Steve, are you
Sorry
listening
about that.
to the session in a different browser window? Because I just heard it and it's on a 30-second delay, and that would mean that you're actively watching it in a different window. Close that window.
I want to stress that this SAM registration can be timely and can be confusing to people and difficult. So don't wait on that to the very end because it does take multiple weeks and times to actually get that done. Okay. Uh, I got you. So close the Brella window.
Yes, Steve.
Is this better?
Yeah, you shouldn't hear an echo anymore.
Is this better, Dell?
Yep. Can you not hear me, Steve?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Sorry, I had the stage turned off and I was still getting the echo. Nonetheless, I was talking about the SAM registration. Also, when people are preparing their solicitations, I'm sorry, their responses, their proposals, we can help you by working through the solicitation review, making sure you understand all the things that you're signing up to, the terms and conditions, the FAR references when they apply, and the supplements. We can help you with actually planning out your proposal and reviewing it, and also pricing. If you're not familiar with all the aspects of how to get your direct and indirect costs into the proposal. So that's just kind of a little background on what PTACs bring to the table when it comes to working with our clients. And we have many clients who are in fact involved in the SBIR programs. So moving forward, this is going to be a round robin type of panel. And we're going to go through our different panelists for each of several questions that I'm going to pose. But we're going to start off with just an introductory type question. And I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about your agency or the unit that you're assigned to. And what we'd like to know is whether or not you're a granting or a contracting agency, or if perhaps you might do both, and why that helps your particular agency complete their mission. So I'd like to start this first question off with Nicole from the Army.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. Hopefully you can hear me since I haven't been stopped. I'm assuming you can. But I work for the Army Applied Civil Program, and we are a contracting agency. We do contracts for our award vehicle. And we find that probably the best use because of the type of awards that we do have, which are geared towards a specific end result versus with a grant, the specifications don't have to be there. Um, Grants are also generally published without restrictions and that type of thing. And of course, with working with the Army Cyber Program, we have to have certain restrictions based on potential um, deliverables that we're looking for, anything that might be CUI related, or sometimes the end result of that project. So glad to be here today, and I'll send it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Next, I'd like to move to Ms. Tammi Neville from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Same question.
Thank you, Steve. As Steve said, my name is Tammi Neville, and I am with the USDA SBIR and newly added for fiscal year 2023 STTR program as well. We are a granting agency, and the mission of our institute is to invest in and advance agricultural research, education, and extension to solve societal challenges. Um, and by having a granting program, we feel we're able to best serve these needs by having 10 very broad topic areas that really complement the mission of our institute.
Thank you, Tammi. Let's move next to Brian with the U.S. Navy. Brian, can you tell us a little bit about your program and your organization?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Brian Shipley, Department of Navy. I'm the Commercialization Program Manager for the Navy. And much like the Army, we're mission oriented. So at the Navy, most of our research is concerned with the modernization, sustainment, and acquisition of everything our warfighters need. And because we're mission oriented, we issue contracts. Because in those contracts, much like Nicole at the Army, we're going to ask you to do something very specific for us. And that contract vehicle allows us to specify what we want you to work on and ultimately what you're going to be delivering through those contracts. The Navy primarily has been a very focused topic organization whereby we issue specific topics, probably the tune of about 150 topics a year, but they're always for very specific things because we're trying to fill capability gaps. In FY23, we will be issuing an open topic as well, and we can talk about that during our discussion. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Brian. Next, let's hear from Jolie from the Department of Homeland Security. Jolie? You're muted.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. So Hi, I'm Jolie Stepnowski from DHS, and I'm the operations manager. DHS is a contracting agency, much like the DoD. We are looking for specific technologies that go to specific end users. Those end users are in mind when we put out our topic solicitation. So that kind of having those specific things makes it necessary to have a contract because of the technologies that we're looking for.
Thank you. Let's see. How about we move to Sara from Air Force Research Lab? Same
Hi,
question.
everyone. Hi, everyone. My name is Sara Telano, and I am with the Air Force Research Lab. Actually, our lab supports both the Air Force and the Space Force. I'm actually a hybrid, so our office does grants, contracts, other transactions, CRADAs, EPAs. So we have a very diverse portfolio of program opportunities and contract opportunities. Because we are research and development focused, a lot of times we also do cooperative agreements. So our portfolio really ranges from very Air Force specific requirements, so that's where we have our contracts, to us having basic research topics out there, and those could be a grant or those could also be a cooperative agreement. We also have direct partnerships with universities. Those are through our EPAs, and I can provide information for that. We work a lot with small business companies. Sometimes they just want to use our lab for testing. So a lot of times we can sign what we call a cooperative research and development agreement. So we're very fortunate to have a very large portfolio of opportunities that we can service small businesses, universities, and even large corporations that want to, do some research and development with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sara. And let's not leave out Miss Genevieve Lind, our panelist from NOAA.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I'm Genevieve. I'm the program manager for the Small Business Innovation Research Program at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Our mission at NOAA revolves around understanding, predicting, and preparing for changes in climate, weather, oceans, and coasts. In terms of funding mechanism, at NOAA, we switched from grants to contracts as our funding mechanism in 2019. And our goal with that was to move away from the perception that NOAA was going to be the customer of a given technology and the model that used the very focused and specific subtopics that represented NOAA-defined problems and solutions, and towards creating a space for innovators to bring us their good ideas to solve problems in the NOAA mission space in order to drive private sector innovation in key emerging technology areas that fall in the NOAA mission, including climate, weather, oceans, and coasts. I do want to take this opportunity to just also mention that we have an open solicitation right now. We only have one solicitation for phase 1 per year. So if you're interested, be sure to check out grants.gov to find our open phase 1 solicitation. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to take it to a different angle here. Let's look at the program from an application side. And I was wondering if you could perhaps share with our audience what is something that people should be aware of about your agency and how your program might change or differ, whether it be a grant or a contract. And I'd like to start this one off with Tammi from the Department of Agriculture.
Thank you, Steve. As I mentioned in the introduction, I think that one of the things that people should know is that we have those 10 very broad topic areas. So even though you may not initially think that your innovation fits into agriculture, your research may fit because of one of these very broad topic areas. So that's, I think, where we're at with my thoughts with that.
Okay, thank you. Brian, would you like to add to that from your perspective?
Sure. I think that's a really important point that she brought up. I usually tell firms, while you think you know what swim lane you want to be in, I strongly encourage everyone to go to SBIR.gov and search the topics there, because what you might think you can do for Navy, you can probably also do at NASA and Army and Air Force. And maybe even NOAA, now that I'm hearing about NOAA, So I think it's important for firms to look broadly when they're looking for topics, even though they think they know what they want to do. When coming specifically to Navy, I think it's important for people to remember that Navy is one of the few components in DoD that accepts proposals from firms who have majority ownership by venture capital, hedge fund, and operating companies. Not every component in DoD does that, and not every agency does that, but Navy is one that does. I think the other thing that is important for firms to know is that during our pre-release period, so at DoD, we have a 30-day pre-release and a 30-day open period. During pre-release, firms may make contact with the technical point of contact associated with the topic. And I strongly encourage firms to use that time to ask the topic author technical questions and kind of fine tune their approach and really understand from the topic author what they're looking for. Our proposal template at Navy is only 10 pages, which is also unlike many of the components in DoD. Many of them have 20-page proposals. Ours is only 10, so you need to get to the point, make it well, and be done in 10 pages. Evaluation criteria, I think for all of us is about the same: technical merits, personnel, and commercialization potential. But at a contracting agency like Navy, that's particularly important because when we address or evaluate for technical merit, we're looking for you to specify in your statement of work what you're going to be doing, the tasks, the events, the major milestones that you're going to be performing in your phase one. If it's a direct to phase two topic, same thing. And for personnel, we want to know who you're going to bid and why you think that they have the expertise to carry out the research. And then if you're given an award, that contract is then going to require you to perform what you proposed in your statement of work. So be careful and be accurate on what you say you're going to do, because at Navy, we incorporate your proposal in your phase one and phase two contracts, and you're held to that letter. And those deliverables you said in your proposal that you were going to make, those are going to be in your contracts with us.
Thank you, Brian. Those are some very important points that we often find ourselves having to remind our clients about. Sometimes we have to explain what 10-page limit means because they want to write and write and write. But nonetheless, let's move on now to the Department of Homeland Security. Jolie, same question.
So for us, I think there's a lot of confusion, not necessarily contracting versus grant-wise, but looking at DoD versus DHS. A lot of the DHS contracts are smaller. We are a smaller agency, so they are 150K. We do a 5-month phase one. We don't have an option period, which I know is something that people do kind of have in the DoD contracts. So I think there's some confusion there. So keeping in mind that it is a 5-month and making sure that they stick within that 5-month 150K is probably one of the most important things to kind of look out for there.
How about Sarah with AFRL?
So I'm going to go back to something that Brian said. Basically, when I talk to a lot of people, think about different sectors. Don't just focus on DoD as a whole or Air Force as a whole. Also think about when we're evaluating your technology, for example, your proposed work. We're also thinking about how can we apply this to the commercial market. So a lot of times, if you come with a solution, think of the solution for a long-term solution, not just. Of course, we're looking for an answer to the topic, but we're also thinking advance. Of phase one, it's going to lead to a phase two. A phase two is going to lead to a phase three. So think ahead of what your proposal has to say for phase one, because the whole point of SBIRs and STTRs is that we can make this commercially available. And so my advice to you as you're writing your proposal is find a path or a way that you can link yourself already to a commercial solution. And that is actually something that as we're looking at our evaluations, even though it's just phase one, we're really looking, is there value to this? Is this actually something that's feasible for the future? So that would definitely be my advice to that is think long-term, not just short-term on your proposal.
Thank you. Genevieve, how about the NOAA approach to this?
Sure, absolutely. I think I'll start by just reiterating a point that a few other people have made that make sure you look at all the agencies when you're considering a specific topic. I think people often see NOAA, National Oceanic, and they stop reading there and think that we only talk about and cover ocean related topics, but there are a lot of other things that we talk about and look into at NOAA. Additionally, I think in terms of the application process, because we have grants, all of our application submission and the whole process does go through grants.gov. And so I think that's one important difference between grants and contracts is where you're going to apply. And so with ours, it's at grants.gov. Also, because we have grants, we use external peer reviewers from a variety of relevant backgrounds to evaluate applications and make selections. And so it can be helpful to keep that in mind when you're going through the application process to understand who the audience is that you're writing your proposal for, which can vary whether an agency has contracts or grants. And then I think I'll also say that with our broad topics, we are ultimately looking for innovator ideas and their innovator plans to execute those ideas. So similarly to what Brian was saying, the technical content portion of your proposal ends up defining the scope of your project and ultimately becomes the work plan for the effort. So it's important to keep that in mind as you're navigating the application process and writing your proposal.
Great, thank you. And
Steve,
finally, on this particular topic,
can I add one last comment real fast?
yeah, sure, Brian.
I think it's funny, we all talked around it, but none of us actually said it. We all have really specific instructions that accompany our topics. And it is so important for all the people proposing that you really read and understand those instructions and follow it to the letter of the law. And then, of course, on the other end, leave yourself time to submit. Because the SBIR program, by and large, is a really competitive program. And when you have hundreds of firms submitting within hours of our solicitations closing, it's harder to get help from the help desks when you think you need it. So submit early and you'll be good to go, I'm sure.
Yeah, and that's an area that I have found that as a PTAC advisor, I've been able to help people with because some of the things that those little details that are in the instructions, they just don't think those are relevant at the time when they're trying to get this proposal out the door. So one final panelist for this topic, and that would be Miss Nicole from the Army.
Well, thank you, Stephen. And Brian, you just took the words right out of my mouth. I was about to just say that. So yes, absolutely follow those instructions. And that's probably one of the biggest failures that we see. We've had to actually turn away proposals because they don't follow the BAA. Simple instructions can be missed so easily. So just always make sure that you read the correct BAA that you're submitting your specific topic under. And again, BAAs change. So just because you send it in a month ago, it could have had an update and page limits could change, who you're submitting it to, what the time that's supposed to be due. So definitely just pay attention to that. And another thing that I have given advice to over the years is making sure that you have someone else read your proposal who's not necessarily within your company, just to read through it. Have your wife look at it, have your uncle read through it, because sometimes you could miss some big important piece that you just thought you were saying over and over, and it just was not spelled out correctly for someone to just understand a certain piece of it. So just having that, or having the SBDC look over your proposal, is another great way to making sure that you are performing all those steps necessary to make sure that you're submitting the best proposal that you absolutely can, because we don't want you to miss out. As well as data assertions, we've had quite a few small businesses who forget to include that. But again, that's something that can be picked up with contracting later. So if it's something that you're looking to do, again, when you're going through your contracting or granting office, they can assist you in that. And we have a lot of folks who are just like, well, I've never done a contract before, I don't know what to do next. We have folks who are standing by to be able to assist you through those steps. So just reach out and ask questions. They know a lot of you are first timers, and it's okay to be a first timer. They're there to assist and help you through that process. So just make sure you reach out and ask those questions once you're selected for an award.
Great, thank you. Okay, our next question, we're going to start off with Brian with the U.S. Navy, and this has to do with awards. Brian, once an award is made, what does that look like to the awardee? And how does your agency handle that, and how might it differ from others, if you can comment on that?
Sure. So we're going to issue you first, we issue select, non-select notices to all of our proposers. So you're going to know whether you were selected or not. We also post our selections at navysbir.com. So you'll know maybe even before the letters are issued that you've been selected at navysbir.com. And we typically make 3 Phase 1 awards for every Phase 1 topic. And if you're selected, once you're selected, you're going to be notified by our contracting officer, and they're going to start working with you on any documentation they need for the contracts, in particular the certification representations, all your certifications that you're a small business and all the things that they're going to need, the contracting officer is going to need to get the contract in place. In Phase 1, we award firm fixed price contracts, which means the price you bid, that's the fixed price for the effort for the period of time, both the base and the option. And your first deliverable is going to be due within 15 days of contract award. That first deliverable is going to be a meeting with the TPOC where you're going to talk about the effort, the way forward, what your plan is to do the research that you've proposed. And it'll be that time where you can start to develop the relationship with the TPOC, get to know him, get to understand his interests, his needs, how often he wants communication from you. And then you're going to be performing to the contract requirements. You're going to get the notification of the award, and actually the contract will be signed probably 2 to 3 weeks before the start date. So you'll be able to see the contract and understand it before it actually starts. And then at the kickoff, you can ask questions if you have any questions. And because we're going to want you to do research specific to the topic, there's going to be deliverable requirements during the Phase 1 award. So the first deliverable is due at day 15. It's the kickoff briefing materials, but then you're going to have progress reports due, and you're going to be working the whole time to meet a final report requirement at the end of the contract. That final report is going to be how you proved feasibility of what you proposed for the topic.
Thank you. Let's move next to Jolie from the Department of Homeland Security.
Ours is very similar to what Brian just kind of went through. The one place that we differ is we do have a group post-award meeting where we bring all the Phase 1 awardees together. During that meeting, we discuss contracts, export controls, fraud, waste, and abuse, Phase 2 information, try to give as many of the cover the frequently asked questions that a lot of, especially like new awardees, may be asking. It also gives them an opportunity to talk to the stakeholders from DHS and ask any other questions that they may have that may come up while we're having those discussions. So I think that's really good to especially for the new awardees that haven't had an SBIR before or haven't had a DHS award before, to learn those differences and nuances that we may have within DHS that don't necessarily apply to other agencies if they're used to having, say, a DoD contract. I think that's one of the biggest things. Again, it's a firm fixed price for Phase 1. It is a 5-month contract. There are monthly deliverables, and then the final report, the feasibility study, is due at the end.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Next, let's go to Sara from Air Force Research Lab.
Hi. Yes, so very similar to Brian and Jolie, I love your idea of you having a large kickoff meeting. We tend to do more individual kickoff meeting where if we introduce who your technical point of contacts are, who your contracting officer is, who the contracting specialist is. We also introduce resources that you may have as well during the period of performance for us. We go over all the deliverables, we go over any terms and conditions. We don't read all the terms and conditions, but we do give people the opportunity to ask if there's something in the contract or the agreement that they don't understand. We do make sure that they feel heard, that they understand that we're here to answer questions for them. Just like everybody else, a lot of our Phase 1s are firm fixed price, so we explain to that how that works. As well, if there's any questions, it's pretty simple for them. But we do try to customize our kickoff meetings to each agreement, and we try to make sure we have everyone that's going to be present during the life of the programs to be there for that. Establishing their point of contacts, I think it's one of those, that relationship building that we try to emphasize from day one.
Thank you. Genevieve, would you like to jump in and tell us a little bit about how these awards are handled with NOAA?
Sure, absolutely. So similarly, we do send notifications of award to all our awardees. We also send review comments to everyone that went through the process, whether they were awarded or not, and that can be really valuable. We do allow resubmissions, though we don't have a formal resubmission process, but taking those reviewer comments and making your proposal better for next time is a great way to get an award. After you accept the award and the period of performance has started, the small business will gain access to the funds. We do have a virtual kickoff meeting and we go over all of the rules and requirements. One note, so with grants, the deliverable are often reports rather than the technology themselves. So we're looking at our interim and our final reports as to the deliverables for these projects. Another important difference between grants and contracts in terms of the execution of the award is the rules that regulate them are different. Contracts are regulated by the Federal Acquisition Regulations or the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations, whereas grants are regulated by the Office of Management and Budget Guidance and then agency terms and conditions. Because we work in a space that has some overlap with some of the contracting agencies, and because we previously used contracts and now we're using grants, we sometimes get companies saying, well, FAR says this, FAR says we can do this, we can do that. And we have to remind them that the grants have a different set of rules and requirements, so they're not administered under the same rules. Another difference between grants and contracts can be in terms of how the money is handled. So with contracts, you often have to submit invoices and then you get reimbursed. But with our grants, you are able to draw down funds in advance. One thing that is different sometimes with NOAA versus the other granting agencies is that Department of Commerce terms and conditions requires our awardees to minimize the amount of cash that they have on hand, which means that they shouldn't have more than $5,000 sitting around unspent for more than 30 days. So those are some of the important differences between the contracting agencies and NOAA, and then also between some of the other granting agencies and how NOAA manages our awards.
Thank you very much, Genevieve. Nicole, could you give us the Army perspective on this same topic?
Absolutely. We're very similar to how Brian, Jolie, and Sarah had already has discussed, but I just wanted to go a little bit deeper. Um, Once you have received that phase one contract or even phase two contract, is making sure that you're registered for at least the Army and wide area workflow. That's where you get your funding from. So making sure that you take the training, getting through that. It can be the first time through can be a little difficult, but it is user friendly. Once you have help with the help desk, they're always there to support you, as well as working with your core, your contracting officer representative, and or your TPOC, your technical point of contact. They'll be able to assist you with that as well. Wide area workflow. Most of the small businesses I work with, it's usually once you submit that invoice, it's been approved. It's 30 days before you receive that first payment. And a lot of folks think it's immediately I'm going to get that payment in my bank account, but just be prepared. It's normally 30 days, especially for your first one, because it has to go through a process of review and approvals. So just to be, being prepared for that and knowing that that's a possibility to come through. Another thing I don't believe that was mentioned was Seadrills. That's another thing that we call for those milestones that are due monthly in most cases, sometimes bi-monthly. That is either measured by a technical report or some type of milestone event meetings. And those are different per contract, and those are set up based on however the proposal was written. So those things again will be discussed with your contracting officer during the negotiation part, but just wanted to mention that as well.
Wonderful. That wide area workflow is another one of those topics that people come to us at PTAC for assistance with from time to time. Generally speaking, though, once we help them get set up and understand how the system works a little bit, we don't hear from them again. So it seems to work pretty well. It's just that initial getting set up to get that first invoice in seems to be the difficulty. Tammi, are you still with us here? From my perspective, you keep fading in and out. So hopefully you'll be able to tackle that same question as well.
I do keep having some technology issues, and I apologize. Um, our I'll quickly kind of summarize. We at USDA, our SBIR awards are 8 months in length, and our STTR awards will be.
I believe we lost Tammy. It looks like her connection is really low. So we'll see if she can respond back once she gets back, Steve. So you
Okay.
might want to skip over.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and move on to the next question. And this one, we're going to start off with Jolie from Department of Homeland Security. And we're going to get into a little bit different topic here, talking about the transition between phase one and phase two programs. And this can be quite different between grants and contracts, or even between different agencies. So what is something that you think could be a hurdle for how your agency approaches this transition point?
So I think one of the big things to keep in mind with
A peer
DHS
review
is that there is no option funding.
So they will get
A
reviewer
lot of
comments, and they will
like
get
a lot of the DoD
panel.
Go ahead, Jolie.
a lot of the DoD
I'm not
agencies
sure if
I
you
know
caught
have,
any of that at all.
have some options between, so that helps with that that funding between your phase one and your phase two. That's not something we offer. We do reach out to companies about 2 weeks before their phase one ends, to have them start working on and submitting their phase two proposal. So those are due
We're having
just
some
a couple
serious
weeks
technical issues
after
here, it looks
the
like,
end
with,
of the
people coming
phase
and
one.
going. People coming and going.
That's due. Those are due at the end, a couple weeks after the end of the phase one. So we do try to minimize that time without funding. And I know for some of the smaller businesses that are just 1 to 2 people, that can be a big difference for them.
Sorry, folks. They
but
said I got dropped. I'm gonna try and work on my internet connection and come back to you guys.
Okay, thanks, Tammy.
That's probably one of the biggest differences, though, that can be there. And I do want to as well put in my shameless plug for the fact that we do have a solicitation currently. Pre-solicitation is currently open, and we do have the solicitation opens tomorrow. So please go out to sbir.dhs.gov and look at those and see if there's anything that you're interested in.
Okay, thank you, Jolie. Sarah, let's move to you. Your connection looks pretty stable. Can you talk a little bit about the transition and hurdles that your agency, your client customers might encounter with your agency?
Yes. So being that we do a lot of research and development, and sometimes we begin with an idea, ensuring that is the idea going to be something that is valued by the customer. So we work a lot with the customer to make sure the customer feels that we can transition to a phase two. Of course, we are a federally funded agency, so we have to ensure that we have the funds available. So as you are progressing, as you're evaluating the technology, we do ask our program managers to start thinking about, can we have funds? Can we request funds? So again, that very forward thinking about, we take our phase one with the hope that there will be a phase two and then eventually a phase three. So working with the customer, working with the contractors or the universities, and ensuring that we are having a positive result of those phase ones so we can transition them to a phase two.
Okay, thank you. Genevieve, how about NOAA on that topic?
Sure. So for our transition from phase one to phase two, phase one awardees go through a similar application process as they do at phase one, with the addition of the required commercialization plan. This allows us to put these applications through the same scientific review process that phase one proposals go through as they move between the two phases. I think one hurdle that this does create is that there is then a gap in funding between phase one and phase two of about 6 months. We're always working to try to minimize the amount of time that companies are without funding. But we also are balancing with that with the importance of having that checkpoint to evaluate the progress, and at phase two especially, to make sure that companies have an understanding of not just the scientific and technical aspects of the project, but of the commercialization components as well.
Okay, thank you. Nicole, would you like to address that from the Army perspective?
Absolutely. Very similar to what's already been described is transitioning from that phase one to phase two. There is no option funding within the Army program, at least on the applied SBIR side of that. They it is based on your regular submission, how well you've completed, and you were able to go through your feasibility study and making sure that you reach those goals and milestones that you put forth in that original contract. Again, another proposal will be submitted for your phase two. That'll go through another evaluation process and based on funding availability as well as on technical feasibility, if it will be selected or not for your phase two. And a lot that is looked at phase two versus your phase one is that commercialization aspect of it. How are you going to be transitioning to the next step? Where within the Army is it going to be utilized, as well as where that other commercial sector might be? Will the police department use that? Will we have some of our school systems be able to utilize it? So always having that in the back of your mind and making sure that you have your marketing strategy completed, as well as knowing and connecting through folks within the Army to make sure that you have the ability to continue with your program and your project to be able to have that widget completed in phase two to be able to do that demonstration phase.
All right, thank you. Tammi, it looks like you're back with us. I'm going to give you a shot at this question. I don't know if you heard it, but we're talking about the transition between phase one and phase two, and in particular, any hurdles that your clients might run into in this transition process specific to your agency.
Thank you, Steve, for repeating the question. I thought I might know where we were at, but I wasn't certain. And thank you for their patience with my connection issues. Um, so for USDA, only our phase one applicants are eligible to apply for phase two, like many of the other agencies. Um, we do not have a direct to phase two option. We have a separate application for the phase two awards. So applicants will apply for phase two or phase one, and if successful and awarded, then after the completion of phase one, they will be eligible to apply for phase two. They don't necessarily have to have the entire phase one award complete, but they need to be at a status that they can step forward and talk more about a commercialization plan within their phase two application, because that phase two application is much more dependent upon the commercialization plan. Um, One thing that I think could be a hurdle for our applicants is that um, we only have one chance for our phase one awardees to apply for phase two. And so if they're not ready to apply, it's currently set up so that when you're awarded a phase one, we have an 8-month SBIR award. And within like 9 or 10 months after the initiation of their phase one application, the phase two application is available and open for them. However, if they're not ready to apply, we really recommend that they wait a year. Um, and make sure that they're at a place where they can work on and communicate their commercialization plan to the peer review panel. If they're not ready, and they apply too early and they don't get selected for funding, there's not another opportunity. They have to go back to phase one and start over with a new twist on their innovation, or perhaps they had problems with their technical feasibility in phase one, and they may go back and do a second phase one before they apply for phase two. But I think that only having that one chance at that phase two application, I really can't encourage enough to for the applicants and the awardees to make sure that they're ready to apply.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to stay with the flow of this particular topic. We're going to move on to Brian, and then Tammi. We'll come back to you for that previous question and let you restate your answer, because it pretty much got broken up. Brian, I'm going to go over to you now with the question on the transition between phase one and phase two.
Thanks, Dave. It's funny listening to all of us. It's fascinating how different we can be and how similar we are. But at Navy, because our topics are very focused and aligned to our programs, there is a transition built into the topic. So when you're working your phase one, you will very clearly know where your transition point is. We want you to understand the broader market, the broader private sector market, the market outside of defense as well, and you need to build that into your proposal for phase two. But by and large, you're going to understand who you're transitioning to and who you're working toward in phase two when you're with the Navy because of the way our topics are structured. They all have sponsors, and you're aligning your work to those sponsors' needs. Likewise, if we're putting out a phase one topic, we've set aside the budget for the phase one awards and the phase two award. I very rarely see a phase. We always award a phase two, or almost always award a phase two when we have a phase one topic. So if you're in a phase one, someone's going to get a phase two unless everyone has fallen flat or the research hasn't gone anywhere and they're doing something different. But I think some of the stumbling blocks are, first of all, like many of us, there's an application process to phase two. And if you don't do that correctly, you sometimes don't get a second chance. Federal law has required that phase two is competitive. So we have to have competitive requirements in place for phase two. And if you don't meet those competitive requirements, there's no do-over. It's kind of like phase one. At least at DoD, we don't let you fix and resubmit your phase one proposal. Likewise, at least at Navy, we don't let you fix and resubmit your phase two proposal. Because in phase two, you're competing with all the awardees who were on the phase one topic with you. So that's sometimes 2, 3 other companies. So it needs to be a competition. If you're selected for phase two, we want you to have an approved accounting system. And that's sometimes a stumbling block. It's not an absolute requirement, but in phase two, we issue cost plus fixed fee contracts. And to get a cost plus fixed fee award, you need to have an accounting system that's been reviewed and approved by DCAA. So you can start that process in phase one, or you can actually start it once you get your selection letter for phase two, and it can usually be done by the time you get the phase two award. At Navy, we do options in our phase one. So your phase one base that you worked for 6 months, then you submit your phase two proposal at the end of the phase one. And if you're selected for phase two, we're going to exercise your option, and you're going to have another 6 months worth of work while we're preparing and awarding your phase two contract. So that's how we bridge then the gap, the funding gap.
Okay, thank you. I think everybody got a chance now to talk about the transition. So I want to go back to Tammi just briefly in USDA about the award and how that looks to the awardee and how it might be different from other agencies.
Sure. Thanks for hopping back to question the previous question for me. Um, I kind of heard from some of the other panelists that you know applicants will receive comments back from their application regardless of whether or not they were selected for funding, and that's not different with USDA. We do however run a peer review panel, which not all agencies do, and so our applicants will receive both the reviewer comments as well as a panel summary, which kind of summarizes the main talking points from the panel deliberations. After being selected for an award, our SBIR awardees have an 8th-month award, and our STTR awardees will have a 12-month award. The reporting responsibilities for these two programs are going to be the same. Both will have interim and final reports due. So just 2 reports for each award, regardless of phase one or phase two. Our phase two awards for both programs are going to be a 24-month award. One thing that I did not catch from the other discussions was the option of extending their awards, and I wanted to bring up that for USDA, it is rather simple for our awardees to request and receive a first time no cost extension up to 12 months. Subsequent or longer no cost extensions do require some more documentation and that kind of stuff. But I wanted to just indicate that those first requests up to the 12-month mark are fairly easy to obtain.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on to our next question. We're going to start off with Sara from AFRL on this one. After a phase two, where else can awardees go with your agency? Are there supplemental programs or companion opportunities that they should be aware of?
Yes, so I'm very excited about this question actually because a lot of times we work with establishing CRADAs, so cooperative research agreements. These are not funded, but it gives again the opportunity for the businesses to continue to work or test their science. So we also have material testing agreements; those are also not funded, but again, they give them access to still continue to develop their research with us. So we do have a large portfolio of opportunities that they can look at and still continue to do the work and the research and develop their science or their technology involved. And we normally, those are very easy to put together. We have a team of individuals that can work with the companies and work with our scientists or engineers to put the right, correct type of agreements they need. We have, again, CRADAs, EPAs for universities. We have if you want to test some of your software as well, we have information testing agreements. So there is a lot of work that we can continue to do with the recipients or the contractors, and not just try phase one or phase two. And we really want to make sure that they continue to work their programs or their projects.
Okay, thank you very much. And trying to keep my rotation straight here, I think we'll move to Genevieve next with NOAA.
Yeah, for sure. So NOAA is one of the agencies that has a smaller SBIR budget. We have about 14 million in our phase one and phase two bucket in fiscal year 23. So we don't have any of the like sequential phase two awards or other opportunities built into the SBIR program for further funding. I will point out the phase three sole source contracts from NOAA or other agencies can be an opportunity to get further resources, even to just support more research and development. So that's always an opportunity for any SBIR funded company to explore. But the important thing about phase three is that that funding comes from sources outside of the SBIR budget and really requires relationship building starting very early on in the project for that to be a successful approach to supporting the work. I'll also add that there are a number of other programs in NOAA that support similar types of research, and those are usually technical area focused. And small businesses are certainly eligible to apply for those opportunities as they are available.
Great, thank you. Nicole, over to you. And what does the Army think about this?
Oh, thanks, Steve. Yes, for our transition part of the program, there are actually several different opportunities that come up. So once that phase two is completed, actually probably in the second year of your phase two, is to start looking into your sequential, which is your second phase two. And that is the same dollar value, same award criteria, basically the same thing, but it's just to give you a plus up into moving your potential prototype into off the shelf, or potentially into a program executive office, which is our ultimate goal of the Applied Cyber program, to make sure that we can have that funding go into a program of record and be able to have that widget that you're working on be put in the hands of our soldiers. So another couple of things that we have that are available is we currently have the AppFit program as well as Catalyst. They're both just started. More information will be coming out on those particular programs in the weeks and months ahead, so please keep an eye out for those. Just wanted to give a little teaser out there and let you know that they're coming, which the dollar value of the SBIR portion of that are going to be quite a bit more than what we've previously seen. So that way it can definitely jumpstart your particular project into that phase 3, where we're trying to have a self-sustained small business company that can be able to sell directly to the government, or potentially even be able to have a prime that they're able to work with and be able to continue with the prototype and have it into something that is self-sustaining within that particular company. So definitely lots of opportunities for phase 3 out there, and we don't like to push back on the small business, but again, once you start seeing progress in your phase 2, keep pushing and keep looking for those marketing advantages and contacts within the Army to be able to keep your project running, and keeping in touch with those program executive offices to make sure that you're following the specific needs that are going on currently with the Army.
All right, thank you. Let's see, Tammi, you're still with us. That's good. You're looking strong. So, could you maybe address a little bit about how USDA, what kind of opportunities, companion opportunities, and other directions awardees might take with USDA?
Sure, Steve. USDA's situation is very similar to what Genevieve described for NOAA. We are one of the smaller SBIR programs with a smaller budget, and therefore we don't have a formal follow-on program for after phase 2. We did just this fall have an opportunity where a very select um, requirement came forward through the broader USDA and out of this secretary's office, that we were able to direct an RFA to a select set of applicants with a very specific topic area, and we may facilitate something like that and treat it like a phase 3 award, but it is something that does occur on a very rare occurrence. Um, Similar to what Sarah indicated, we do also work with CRADAs and along with the ARS, or Agricultural Research Service branch of USDA, which could provide those opportunities and those avenues for applicants, if they have developed those relationships well in advance, to use those resources and develop those resources early on during their SBIR tenure, for future moving forward with those angel investors, those venture capitalists, for finding those funding resources when they have, for lack of a better term, for when they've graduated from the USDA SBIR or STTR programs.
All right, thank you. Brian, over to you and the Navy perspective.
So, I think it's important to remember that we are a contracting command, like Nicole. So we are ultimately the buyer of what you're doing. So you should be positioning yourself and marketing yourself and doing your business development from phase 1 all the way through phase 2. And that starts with your technical point of contact who's running your project. That person should be pulling the project to them. They are your champion, and they should be arming you with information, with contacts, with references who you can contact in the broader picture to find opportunities for your technology. At the same time, you're working toward meeting their needs, but please utilize them, their expertise, their network, any information that they'll give you for the bigger picture to help understand where you can take what you're doing. And that includes outside the defense market. I usually tell people, small businesses also, that most of our buying commands, so the Navy has 8 system commands, they're called buying commands. They have open BAAs for their buying command. So let's say one of the buying commands is NAVC, everything ships and submarines and stuff. They have an open BAA completely separate from the SBIR program where they put out needs to industry, large and small, and you can submit to those general needs with your ideas, your technology, things you want to do for them. So many of our buying commands, and I would imagine that many of the agencies on this call have similar open solicitations for their entire agency that you should look into and you should try to find. So that's a huge opportunity. I'll also say that the Federal Labs Consortium I was just looking it up, federallabs.org is a way that small businesses can connect to work that's being done in the Navy's warfare centers and align what they're doing to those warfare center needs and apply for contracts and grants with those warfare centers, likely contracts. But federallabs.org is a great place to find opportunities as well.
And Stephen, I do have one go back. Actually,
Yeah,
Brian,
go ahead.
you reminded me of something actually. We actually have a website that we always refer people to. If you have an idea, you can submit your idea there. Your TPOC might only know so many people, but at least it's a starting point. However, through the Air Force Connect website, you can actually submit your idea, and that idea gets sent out to several different people. So that's, many entities have a platform very similar to this. If your entity has a platform similar to this, take advantage of that because there's multiple people looking at your ideas and can have contact with you and reach out to you directly. So yeah, definitely take advantage of those things. And ours is Air Force Technology, airforcetechconnect.org. So putting a pitch for that.
Okay, that's great. Let's see, just to wrap up this particular question, I think Jolie from Department of Homeland Security is the only person we haven't heard from.
Okay, I will try to be quick. As I said earlier, all of our topics, when they go out in the solicitation, do have an end user in mind. Things that we do within the SBIR office to help with that transition is we do have a CRPP program, which is 250 up to 250K and a 12 months to kind of help with testing and evaluation. We do a matching funds program as well. That's not utilized very often. And on occasion, we can do a second phase 2. We are, again, very similarly to some of the others on the panel, a smaller agency. We don't have a whole lot of funding, but we do try to help out with that. And some of our program managers are amazing and utilize their SBIRs to their full advantage. Our Screening at Speed program, he has I want to say 4 or 5 different phase 3 projects that he's done. Some of it's R&D, some of it's actually in the acquisition, world, but he's great at utilizing the SBIRs that he puts topics out there for. Some of the other ones are as well. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities within, DHS, S&T, and in the community to get to that phase 3. And I think a lot of our topic managers are great about making sure that the projects that they're working on are getting there.
All right. I've got one more question here. And we're going to start off with Genevieve from NOAA on this one. This is about phase 3, which is all about commercialization of the technology. So I know this may not apply to everyone, but how do you approach phase 3, and what should an applicant or an awardee understand about the differences between a grant and a contract in this particular aspect?
Sure, absolutely. I think when I use the phrase phase 3, I'm talking broadly about commercialization and not just acquisition from the federal agency perspective. One thing that we do is similarly to the other agencies, we offer a commercialization assistance program for our phase 2 awardees, which provides some mentoring and training and includes one-on-one engagement with industry-specific business consultants to help people understand that component of their projects. We're actively working on building additional mechanisms and opportunities to support the commercialization of our NOAA SBIR funded technologies. In general, we're looking for technologies that have commercial potential beyond NOAA as a customer. So our efforts to support commercialization are going to focus on helping awardees build relationships with a variety of potential investors and customers, both within and outside of the government. This is kind of a growing area of effort within the NOAA SBIR program. So overall, I would just say stay tuned for some more opportunities in this space coming soon.
Okay, thank you. Nicole, would you like to address that topic?
Absolutely. So, yeah, for our particular phase threes, we don't actually award those phase three contracts within our contracting center of excellence, but they are actually done through program executive offices. So, as Genevieve was mentioning, we assist those small businesses in locating their program executive office that they should be working with. They should have developed their relationship within their phase one and phase two. And we have, as some have mentioned earlier, we have technical assistance information that's available throughout through FedTech to assist our small businesses to be able to have the resources needed to be able to work through their phase threes and to be able to find those contracts. Because basically, a phase three, at least under Army standards, is any funding that is outside or not earmarked underneath the SBIR program. So it can be outside investors, it can be a prime, it can be through a program executive office, it can be through DARPA, any of the other places that have additional funding that can be able to put on a specific contract to be able to extend the life cycle of that particular award.
Okay, Tammi?
Sure. Thank you, Steve. I think similar to Genevieve, the budget at USDA is on the smaller side, and so we haven't, as I said earlier, had a lot of phase three commercialization funded events, within USDA. However, we are. Like I said, we did have this opportunity this last fall for a few applicants to be able to do apply to a phase three award. We have also similar to what Genevieve said, we've started exploring other branches within USDA and looking at their interest in potentially working to provide some phase three funding through the different institutions or agencies or branches within USDA. Perhaps there might be an avenue through like Forest Service or through rural and community development or the NRCS. These are avenues that we're exploring and looking into, but that we don't have set up or concrete yet.
Okay, thank you. Brian, would you like to address that for the Navy?
Sure. So Navy has several transition programs that we use to help firms transition from phase two to phase three. Our longest running transition program is our STP program, SBIR STTR transition program. It's been around for 22 years, and it's a 11-month program where we actually assign business consultants to our phase two awardees, and they work with you through an 11-month period to mentor you, to train you, to help you develop materials, to help identify opportunities for you. And we also, a big part of that program is that we take you to events to meet technical people, to be able to give tech talks outside of our industry to help you understand the markets and further advance your technology and get it out there. We also have a program called Navy Launch, which is designed specifically to help position companies to transition outside of the defense space, so in truly private sector. That's a 10-month program that phase two firms are eligible for. We also have an experimentation group that works with our phase two awardees to get them into experiments so they can demonstrate their technology in labs, on ships, in program offices, and that helps people understand what's required to transition and helps people transition. And I think most importantly, we have transition agents in our system commands, in our SBIR offices embedded in our system commands. And those transition agents are there to help be your advocate and help you find the resources and find the opportunities and sometimes do the phase 3 paperwork for you, helping you develop those phase 3 packages to submit to contracting offices. Our Contracting Center of Excellence does quite a number of phase 3 contracts, but any Navy contracting office can do a phase 3 contract, and GSA also awards quite a few phase 3 contracts. So there's plenty of contracting opportunities for phase 3, and Navy has plenty of programs to help you get you there.
Thank you. That's a good point about GSA. I'd forgotten about that. Okay, Jolie, would you like to address this topic as it relates to Homeland Security?
Absolutely. So I'll follow on with Brian. Ours is called CAM, which is the Commercialization Assistance Marketplace. That's what we use to help the phase 2 companies with their transition. They do needs assessment. They do current detailed market information to fill the gaps. One thing that we do differently is we do have what we call a showcase. So for each of the components, there's a showcase that has their SBIR technologies in it, and feds are invited to those to be able to kind of see what technologies we have and if they have an interest in it. The other thing that we have is we have portfolio managers that are kind of the connection between the science and technology office and the components, and they become the champion for those. They help with our topics, but they also become the champion for some of those topics when it comes to getting them into the component and understanding what the component needs are and how to kind of get those SBIRs in the right position to be able to be transitioned into the components that they were initially put out for.
Okay. I think we're down to our last speaker for this topic, and that would be Sara from Air Force Research Lab.
So we always encourage the companies and small businesses to, of course, work with their TPOCs. Their TPOCs know where their technology is going. With their TPOCs or their program managers, we always encourage them to start thinking ahead. Again, start thinking of the money and the funding, because it's not, of course, SBIR or STTR specific. We have to find our own money. So if the technology and the science is proven, encourage those PMs, those TPOCs to secure funding. We do have a program called AFWorks as well that really works with transitioning phase 1 and phase 2 to phase 3s. So we try to provide as many resources as possible to the small businesses. And again, we always do encourage as well to think of other sectors. Maybe there's a different sector that can apply that technology to become commercially available. We do, of course, have several solicitations that are open. Those are called ARAs. So we do have acquisitions that are advanced research announcements, and that could be a possibility for them to continue into those phase 3 developments.
All right. Thank you very much. Del, that concludes this part of the roundtable. Do you have some questions from the audience that you want to bring up?
Yes, Steve, I actually do. There were a couple of questions that got dropped in. One question, actually, you had two questions that were directed towards you, Brian. One of the questions was you had talked very briefly, very minor mention about like a Navy open topic in 2023. Could you give a little bit more information about that?
Just that we're going to have one, and we're likely going to frame it to particular technology areas. We haven't decided on what technology areas. Air Force has done a great job, I guess specifically AFWorks has done a great job at introducing the world to the concept of an open topic. And I think Navy is going to take that same construct, but try to define some swim lanes a little bit so that when we collect good ideas for that open topic, they're already kind of binned in technical areas so that we can align them to evaluators and get them processed quickly. Because while Congress has asked everyone to do open topics, they didn't give us any leeway on our notification requirements or our award timelines. So we have to keep an agile, fast process.
Great. And the other question I'd like to address, because I think it is important, we are pretty much at time, but I would like everybody to kind of just take one stab at this, because this came in, we see it a lot, in the support that we offer for businesses. But when somebody submits an SBIR or other grant to a government agency, if the technology is highly classified or is going to be highly classified, what do they need to be aware of? Are there any special controls they need to, issue? People always worry about that, and is it really a worry they should have?
I'd say yes. I'll jump right in. So, at least for DoD, no one should ever submit any classified information in a proposal. Our systems are not capable of securing information that's not just confidential to the company. So please don't ever submit anything, any classified information into any of our systems, either for phase 1 or phase 2. And I think I can also say in a blanket way for DoD that we won't do classified work in phase 1 because classifying work is a limiting factor for small business, and we don't want to limit anybody in any way. So none of us are doing classified work in phase 1. We want everyone to participate. What we might say in the topic, and you guys, DoD, can correct me, what we might say in the topic is that in phase 2, it's gonna move to classified, or we're gonna have to provide you classified information for you to continue if you go to phase 2. And then we're gonna work with you in phase 1 to make sure you're set up to do that in phase 2 then, because you have to have facility clearances, security clearances possibly, and we wanna set you up for success. So we will do everything we can to help you, and we're gonna warn you ahead of time in the phase 1 topic if that's where it's going in phase 2. But please don't submit anything classified to any of our systems.
Real quickly, does anybody else want to address that, or did Brian kind of encapsulate it for everyone?
I think Brian captured DHS. We don't accept any classified phase 1 or phase 2. In the 3 years that I've been at DHS, I have not seen anything go classified, which I can say that was different when I was in DoD, but.
Alrighty, well, we will go ahead and turn it over to Garrett now. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, Steve, and all the panelists for that awesome roundtable on the differences between granting and contracting agencies, and for all of our participants and the agencies you represent. We hope that was informative and lets you chart a better pathway for your business as you move through the SBIR and STTR programs. Now, we are going to take a quick final break to set up for our last panel of the day. So please explore the expo hall, check out the breakout rooms, or network with other attendees. We'll be back at 3 p.m.